I think we might have to start talking about SMU as an ACC contender, and not just because Miami lost this weekend. This is a team that had its struggles early in the season. However, there are some really good things about this team that they did against Clemson today. And there are a couple things that we learned about this team. And we'll start with the obvious one, which is getting revenge from the ACC Championship. And granted, Clemson's going through its struggles. They didn't have Cade Klubnik, but still, this is still an SMU team that was able to win by 11 on the road. Rhett Lashley's team deserves a lot of credit for what they were able to do. And they showed that when they're playing at their best, they can play at a high level. They can be explosive. They can be disruptive on defense. Now, again, for Clemson, having Christopher Vizina as the starting quarterback obviously takes things down a notch. However, we got to see some of those skill position players step up in a big way, and that was really exciting. That was fun to watch. We saw the receivers step up in a big way. Now, the first half was largely SMU, and it felt like the Mustangs were going to, at one point, it felt like there was a breaking point where if SMU kept going, it was just going to be a blowout. Fortunately for Clemson, they had guys step up and make sure that it wasn't going to be the case. TJ Moore, phenomenal game. He had arguably his best game of his career. He scores his first touchdown in the second quarter, 32-yard touchdown from Vizina. You had, and his second touchdown, a 62-yard sick one-handed catch in the second half, in the third quarter. That was just unreal. And again, he was making play after play after play. And even later in that quarter, they had to settle for a field goal, but TJ Moore was getting open. He was making sure that they had opportunities to put points on the board. And he finished with 5 catches for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Tony Williams, 6 catches, 54 yards. Now you're looking at what can you do better. And truly, I think that the scary part about Clemson is that even if Klubnik's in, this still holds true. If you had better play at quarterback, this would be one of the most terrifying offenses in college football. Now, you can make an argument, though, that the rushing attack, it leaves something to be desired. And that's very true. The fact that they're still using Adam Randall as their running back speaks to the concerns you have about that group. Now, I'm not in practice. I don't know what's going on there, but clearly Gideon Davidson is not living up to what expectations they have, whatever that may be. And the depth clearly is a question mark. That is a big time concern if you're Clemson. And for the long term, if you're looking at big picture, what does that mean for this team? That's going to be a big question. Now, on the SMU side of things, you saw them kind of deal with some adversity, because having Kevin Jennings is going to afford you some luxuries that not a lot of teams have. And when you look at what happened in this game, Clemson was getting pressure on Kevin Jennings, and that did affect his game. That did affect the decisions he made. However, I really like the adjustments that this team made, the play calling, the quarterback play that allowed them to continue making plays and putting points on the board. You started off with a big Jordan Hudson touchdown, 70-yard corner route that he beats his man to the end zone. It's just the explosive plays that you've come to expect with SMU. And the one thing I kept noting watching this game is that Kevin Jennings' mobility is huge. And really in college football, you need a mobile quarterback if you want to have any sort of success. And having a mobile quarterback like Kevin Jennings gave SMU more opportunities to put points on the board and gave them opportunities to extend plays. And we'll see that later in the fourth quarter. You settled for field goals early, but the nice thing is that your defense was getting enough stops where even though you were only up 16-7 at halftime, you still felt like you were in a good position to win this football game. You felt like you were in control. And again, Kevin Jennings looked poised, looked in control, and he was taking shots, but it was still a team that felt like they were in the right place at the right time to make those kinds of plays, and they just needed to wait and continued chipping away until the explosive plays kind of came. And the third quarter, we kind of saw that. You see Chris Johnson Jr. break off a 30-yard run, and then later Derek McFall gets a 35-yard touchdown run. And that's where you kind of felt, okay, this is where this is going to go in favor of SMU. Clemson obviously did not go away. TJ Moore made sure of that. But then SMU has a drive in the fourth quarter, early in the fourth quarter, where again, Jennings is getting pressured, he's getting hit, but they're still driving. And then he throws a great pass to Matthew Hibner, who makes a one-handed catch for a touchdown with 12:30 left in the fourth quarter. And it was the perfect example of this team not crumbling in the moment. When you look at the play, Clemson gets pressure on Kevin Jennings. He knows he has man coverage. He knows that his two of his guys are running a mesh route. Somebody's going to be open, and Hibner was that guy. He knew that he was going to be open. However, Hibner's coming from the right side. The pressure's also coming from the right side. Jennings backpedals essentially as much as he can, and then he gets a pass off at the last second. Hibner one-hands it and then scores. That was a good example of this team not crumbling under the pressure. And even when Clemson scores on Tristan Smith touchdown to pull within one score, this team just took the ensuing drive, drove it down the field, and scored a touchdown to make it 35-24. That is a proof that this team, that Rhett Lashley's team, is capable of handling the moment when it's big, when the spotlight is bright. Now, whether or not they are truly ACC contenders, that is still a question. However, they are now in a great place where you feel like you can consider them in that conversation. The defense had its moments where it was stifling. It was disruptive. And they had 8 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. So even though they gave up 24 points, which is not actually that bad, this game told me a lot about SMU that could potentially put them in that conversation. And I think that we have to have that conversation now. Kevin Jennings is having a year that not a lot of people are talking about. And this is a game that should keep that conversation going, or at least start it for people who aren't starting it already. This is going to be a fun team to watch, and the ACC should be aware of where they're at all times.